There we go.
All right. So we're going to be talking about the cycles of time and the evolution of consciousness. I've been working on these ideas for a really long time. And I don't know, they just started coming together like the past couple months. And of course, like, you know, whenever you get on the roll with something, your best friend will like have the book you need or something like that, you know? So that happened. And the book that I ended up with was this Egyptian Myths and Mysteries by Rudolf Steiner. Can you guys see that?
Mm-hmm.
So it's wild because when I read this, it resonated so much. And Rudolf Steiner is like, I'm trying to think of how to describe him. He's like a spiritual philosopher. He came up with anthroposophy, which is like, it kind of stemmed from theosophy, and theosophy is about going within for information, and anthroposophy is like looking for the science in spirituality. And so this guy was like right up my alley because that's what I like to do too. And so what I started finding when I was looking into this is just how much all of these cycles relate to the cycles of nature. So it started with the Yugas. And so this is a Hindu sort of chart of time. You have the Satya, the Treta, the Dwapara, and the Kali. And the Satya is the golden age where we are like 100% spirit, or 100% embodied. The Treta is a silver, which we're like 75% spirit. Our ego starts to develop. We start to become a little denser. And then there's the Dwapara, or the Bronze Age, where we're 50% spirit and more conflict arises. We become denser. And then we have the Kali, which is the Iron Age, where we're 25% spirit and we're exposed to our darkest potential. We face our shadow in this material realm and we're at our densest form. So now we're coming out of the Kali Yuga and entering the Dwapara Yuga, gaining some of our spirit back to become 50% spirit and 50% matter. And through each yuga, there are rishis or avatars, people who hold the knowledge of spiritual teachings and share it with people to keep it alive through the different ages. And so many people who are awakening now had lives as spiritual initiates in the past. So you'll also notice, like, through the Kali, Jesus Christ was born and was like an avatar for a divine power, you know. So that usually happens in a very dark age so that people will hold on to some remembrance of the spiritual age. So these are like, this is the larger cycles of the yugas, and it's crazy, these amounts of time, like 311 trillion years. And then they break down within each one of these. And here at the bottom, you can see the older yuga cycle, or the older yuga system, which was much longer than what people use today. And my theory as to why it was longer then and why we sort of adapted a shorter one now is that each one of our steps in evolution took thousands of years. So I just think that the denser we become, the faster we kind of evolve, or the faster that these cycles go, just like a spiral. So the newer version of the Yugas was channeled in 1894 by Sri Yukteswar, and they're much closer to the reciprocal constants of nature. So like, for example, these older ones just have a golden age, silver age, bronze age, the Kali Yuga, and then there would be a big cataclysm and then we would just start in the golden age again. It was like everything was wiped away, and then some divine beings would come and help us start our civilization again. And what we've evolved into now is having shorter cycles, where instead of it going from a dark age right back to a golden age, we evolve out of the dark age and gradually ascend back up towards a golden age. So there's geological evidence that the Great Flood happened around 12,000 years ago, and civilization started over in the golden age. Many believe this was the fall of Atlantis. And we have Göbekli Tepe, which is the oldest structure that we've discovered so far, back here in around 10,000 BC or 10,500. And but some people believe the Sphinx could be up to 38,000 years old. So that could have taken us back to before, the cataclysm. And there's geological evidence for this. Robert Schoch was studying the rocks of the Sphinx and saw where weather had eroded. So it means that the Sphinx would have been there, sitting there through this big cataclysmic flood that the world experienced. And so, like I was saying earlier, when we come into a golden age, there's stories of higher beings assisting humanity in the golden age to construct their civilizations. Agriculture and advanced construction seem to spring out of nowhere, according to academia. And it's kind of, we see this as like a mystery. So here's the Yugas overlapped with the Aztec sunstone, which is descended from the Mayan calendar. And so you can see how these Yugas line up with the different suns. The Aztecs describe the different epochs as different suns. So Rudolf Steiner also talks about this, and how we were in the fifth epoch in the early 1900s and beginning to see the sixth. And we see this represented by the suns from the Mayan and the Aztec calendar here. So as you can see, here's the fifth sun, the Kali Yuga, and 2012 was the beginning of the sixth sun. So now we're in the sixth, in the age of Aquarius, and you can see here, it's the Bronze era. So this is an illustration from Walter Russell about how the dimension of time works. So as we ascend in frequency, our perception of time changes. We get closer to vibrating at the rate of higher or less dense dimensions, resulting in time being experienced differently. So time is thought of as the fourth dimension. And as many say, we're ascending to the fifth dimension. So living in a third dimensional reality, experiencing the fourth dimension as time and oscillating between the third and the fifth gives us a different experience of time as we used to know it. So we can perceive it as faster or slower depending on our changing frequency. And if you're in a lower vibration, time may feel slower, and at a higher vibration, time may go faster or almost cease to exist. And you may even feel that you are creating more time in your day when you're fully enjoying your present moments. And looking at the spiral, it feels as though the closer we get to the center, the less time it takes to make a revolution. As our consciousness reascends closer to source energy, which would be the center, our perception of time changes. So this is kind of what I'm looking at as well when I'm talking about the evolution happening faster and those yugas decreasing in their length. It's because as you start to ascend, your perception of time starts to change depending on which dimension you're sort of vibrating with. And another attribute of evolution through the yugas is the size of humans. So in the diagram below, it shows how we were thought to be larger and to have longer lifespans through the golden age. Like basically the more spiritual that age, the larger we were. And I'm thinking like this could have been even etherically, but it also seems like it may have been physically, because we do hear about like giant bones being dug up in Sardinia and all over the world. So this could be a piece to that mystery. And here's another Walter Russell illustration, the universal seesaw. So you can see how the less dense matter is, the larger it appears. And we see this reflected over here in the Yuga wheel, or even if I overlapped the Yuga wheel over this, you know, the golden age would be longer, larger, the silver a little bit smaller, the bronze smaller, and then the Kali much smaller. And so you can just see how this reflects in nature with the reciprocal constants of contraction and expansion, appearance and disappearance. So the other thing that I kind of wanted to communicate through this as well is that we don't only ascend, we also descend. So the cycle of the sun, you can see, I had some fun overlapping like cycles of nature with this Yuga wheel. So you can see here, this is like the cycle of the sun and also the astrology chart. So you have like midheaven, midday, you have the sunset or your DC line in astrology, you have the IC line, midnight, and then the AC, your sunrise. And then you can see it even with the cycle of human life. You're born, you come from the spiritual worlds, and you start to descend into childhood. And then you start to develop your ego and puberty and adolescence, and then into adulthood. And then you have like the midlife crisis or the dark night of the soul down in the Kali Yuga. And then you go through menopause, empty nest, new freedom, to being a senior citizen, and then eventually returning to the all. And you can see it in the cycle of a plant life. You have the seed or the spark of life, germination, vegetal growth, blooming, fruiting, ripening, harvesting, storage, eating, decomposition, and the remaining seeds drop to the earth to be planted again. You can even see it with the cycle of the moon too. I had to turn the chart sideways here to line up with this illustration of the moon cycles, but from the new moon to the full moon, you can see the same type of cycle. What's interesting is with this illustration, it's actually like almost a mirror, which I find fascinating because the moon is a mirror of the sun. So it's really not that surprising, you know, since it reflects the sun's rays, it kind of makes sense that it would go in the opposite order. And then we have the hero's journey. So this is how we experience all of our parts to remember our wholeness and the connection to source, which holds everything, bringing light to all parts and archetypes that create our experiences. This is our journey into the spirit world and our return to the ordinary world. So, you know, you start out in this ordinary world, there's a call to adventure. Usually the hero refuses the call, then he meets a mentor, and then he crosses the threshold where he comes up into this conflict. There's tests, he meets allies and enemies, there's an approach, and then we hit the ordeal, the death and the rebirth. And then we ascend back up with the reward, seizing of the sword, the road back, resurrection, and we return with the elixir. So this is like the journey of gathering your spiritual knowledge, which takes diving into the shadow or facing death like head on, so that you realize that you are an eternal being. And then we get into temple calendars. So this is the Temple of Kukulcan at Chichen Itza in Mexico, and it's a calendar within a temple. So it has 9 levels, and they're thought to represent the 9 waves of consciousness. It has 91 steps on 4 sides, equaling 364, plus the top tier equals 365 days of the year. And then the Mayans counted in sets of 20 rather than 10 like we do. And I thought, well, maybe they counted in sets of 20 because they're counting for that ascension and descension, not just the 1 to 10. And I just kind of illustrated that with this little chart here. But the other reason I was thinking of that is because the story with this temple is about the feathered serpent Kukulcan, which is basically the same story as the hero's journey. He ascends into the other world, and then he returns with information and with sacred knowledge. So you can see that like ascent and descent. This temple is aligned astronomically with the spring equinox and the winter solstice. And on the spring equinox, the stairway casts this shadow of a snake descending down into the carved head of the feathered serpent Kukulcan. And this represents his return. And it's during these 2 astronomical events, the spring equinox and winter solstice, that spiritual initiations are performed. And I haven't been there on this day, but I've seen videos. The snake is actually like slithering when you look at it on that day. It's pretty amazing. And so you see here in this Walter Russell illustration how the pendulum of experience is similar to the shape of the pyramids and the temples. So this represents our connection to source consciousness, which separated itself to descend into matter and have different experiences. So this is when duality was created, when source decided to become something else. And this is the only way we could experience physicality. So we had to fragment this energy into separate beings. And this also is how we were able to experience love. Because if you don't have another person around to love, I don't know where that feeling would come from. And then along with that, when somebody dies that you love, you feel grief, you feel all these different emotions, frustration, anger, all of it. And you can see how, that pendulum between those feelings is always swinging. Again, this represents like those, what I call this reciprocal constants of nature. Everything is an inhale and an exhale, day and night. And so we can see our urge to create anew and our urge to belong and remember where we came from. And this is kind of what keeps our heart and our mind going. This is what keeps everything beating, is that oscillation between the two. And as we oscillate between that and have our different experiences, we continue evolving. So now I'm going to get into the evolution of consciousness into form. And I just wanted to point out really quick that the astrology signs also apply to different parts of our body. And I believe they apply in this order that we developed in, like the parts of our bodies that became not just spiritually represented, but became physical, material parts of us. So according to Steiner, long ago, the sun, the moon, and the earth were one body of consciousness. And this is when the human was pure consciousness. There were no individuals, we just were. And I think it's wild. I made this illustration of the planets, nesting within each other like this. And I said, that looks like a cell. Sure enough, when you look up the nucleus of a cell, this is what it looks like. And so I just put the little definition here. And what I thought was fascinating is that the nucleus holds the DNA, the genetic material, and it's the most important and defining feature of all higher organisms. Its main function is to control and coordinate the functioning of the entire cell. The word nucleus is derived from the Latin word nucleus, meaning kernel or seed. So this is the spark of life that we all descended from. This is that one point at the top of the pyramid. And next, Steiner says the sun split off and left behind the earth and the moon together, the earth being a body of water. This was a dark time. We only had clairvoyant vision and only saw the spirit world. There was no awareness of material existence yet, and our beings started to slowly form into chalice-shaped etheric bodies. Like if you imagined the inside of a torus field, it would be shaped like that, like just a light body shaped like a chalice. And this leads us into the time of Lemuria, when we were deeply connected to water. This is the Piscean stage of human development, where we were aquatic beings. So Pisces representing the feet, we started to develop a fishtail. And you see this in the symbol of the fish in Christianity, the myth of mermaids, and in the representation of the Dogon people in ancient Sumeria. So this is an illustration of the Dogon, one of the Dogon tribe, which they said descended from Sirius. And then I put a little mermaid representation over here as well. We started to develop a sense of perception and of feeling. We started to perceive our feelings. So we were purely intuitive in this time. So imagine like having no material awareness, just only clairvoyance. Like basically your consciousness is the dream world. And there's probably not much to dream about yet because there's no material existence yet. And next, the moon began to split off from the earth, still leaving a body of water, gradually getting denser and denser, bringing many animal forms to the lower body of humans. And this period is represented by the serpent or the dragon, our lower nature. We only had a feeling. We only had feelings, and we swam around developing our upper light being into a sensory organ that we navigated the waters with. As we continued to densify into what we are today, this became our pineal gland. In the past, it was larger and required a larger skull to hold. When the moon withdrew from the earth, sexuality appeared, and this was in the sign of Scorpio. The lower body of the human form continued to densify into different forms, such as horses, lions, and so on. And we started to think, and then at this time we started to think, and this introduces us into the Atlantean epoch. As we shed our animal forms, that created the animals on Earth today. So going from Lemuria into Atlantis, we're still just like these etheric beings. And that's why our beings could change into all of these animal forms. And this is what you see represented in statues in Sumer and with the Sphinx. This is like the form of our ancestors, but not physically. It was just etheric, and it could be perceived clairvoyantly. And then what I also love is you see the elongated skulls coming from many cultures in Egypt and Peru, in different parts of the world. And this is, a part of our evolution when we still had that very large pineal gland in our brain. And then we get to when Set killed Osiris, as told in the Egyptian myth. And this is like, we need to understand Set and Osiris, I believe, were known way before like the Egyptian dynasties that we think of today, because those were much more recent. But this is like very ancient knowledge, and we're thinking of these people as gods. So when Set killed Osiris, as told in the Egyptian myth, he cut him into 14 pieces and spread them out. Isis traveled through Egypt collecting the pieces to remember him, put his members back together. And so the 14 pieces represent the sun beings that we used to be, as the moon reflects the sun in her 14 phases from new to full. The moon represents our memories. It's our memory of what we used to be now that the moon and the sun have separated. She also represents our emotions and the divine feminine. And when Osiris was killed, we began to breathe and we were no longer immortal. This brought us into the post-Atlantean epoch. And also now we're fully physical and we've developed our will. And we're fully aware of the material realm and must work a bit harder to get back in touch with the spiritual worlds. So this is where spiritual initiation practices begin throughout different cultures. And now that we're becoming conscious of the fact that we are souls having a physical experience, we're remembering our free will and our power to create our reality. We now have feeling, thinking, and willing, and we're conscious of them all. So we're realizing that we are gods collectively creating this reality that we experience. And so now, as Rudolf Steiner predicted, our consciousness is splitting. One group of people will become conscious of their soul and free will and lead with their heart, and the others will keep relying on outside forces to tell them what to do, how to live, and so on. And this whole creation story relates to what Lao Tzu wrote in the Tao Te Ching. Tao gives birth to one gives birth to two, the two gives birth to three, the three gives birth to all universal things, and all universal things shoulder the yin and embrace the yang. The yin and the yang mingle and mix with each other to beget the harmony. So there's always got to be some opposing force, right, to keep things in motion. And our consciousness has been mostly aware of this material reality for a couple thousand years. And now that consciousness is splitting in two. So it's splitting to welcome back the awareness of spiritual worlds to help rebalance the scales. And then I created this diagram to sort of track the spiritual evolution and then the fall into matter. And you can see nature's waveform in this. You know, it's like the spiral, the wave, the vortex. And I put it in this little hourglass just because I was like, oh, that's what I see around this. So because our souls are eternal, we've journeyed through many of these different times throughout our history. And we can go into our inner temple to access those memories at any time. And as our consciousness continues to ascend, we have more access to those spiritual worlds and more access to the Akashic records. So we have access to all time and all space, which I feel like is kind of like getting to the center of the spiral. But right now in this time, we have the most in common with the Egyptian dynastic era, when people were fully physical and went through spiritual initiations to remember the spiritual worlds. So remembering our memories from those times can help us today, but it's also important to remember that we're not trying to repeat history, but to learn from it. So today, our spiritual initiations are often built into our everyday lives. And I wanted to show you this diagram a little closer. Let me find it. So you can see the top part is when we had clairvoyant perception and we just lived in the spiritual worlds. And you can see, you know, the planets and where they split, the Lemurian epoch. We have feeling, the Atlantean epoch, we have thinking, and then willing, and then the fall. And then we fall down, you know, how that Kali Yuga used to work. We fall into the dark age and we come out to a golden age, to the physical world. And this is what we call the post-Atlantean epoch. So now we have material perception, and we gradually start to lose our spiritual perception. And as that happens, we start having spiritual initiations. We start having people who come through that are like rishis or avatars. We have Moses, Solomon, Homer, Lao Tzu, Zoroaster, Buddha, Plato, Aristotle, Alexander, Jesus Christ, Da Vinci, Copernicus, Magellan, and then more recently, Newton. I added Rudolf Steiner in there, Einstein, and then here we are now in Aquarius, getting closer to the center of this spiral. And then who knows where we'll pop out from there. It's just a constant oscillation between two different worlds. So with all of this information, feel free to take what resonates and just leave the rest, and also do your own research by accessing your Akashic records from within, you know? But yeah, do you guys have any questions or thoughts or?
So when we were talking about like, you know, changing size based on like, I guess your frequency, or I don't, oh God, it's all so confusing. But I read like, now I'm gonna have to like look over that slideshow again and be like, wait.
I know it's a lot of information. I tried to condense it as much.
No, I mean, I love it. Like I always want to learn new things. But so I like read, or like during biblical times and stuff like that, like when Noah was, you know, building his ark and stuff, during that time period, they were actually like a lot shorter than us now. Is that because they had like lost touch with like spirituality or something? Like,
possibly.
I read a book that was basically like, okay, you know, like A Wrinkle in Time, the book A Wrinkle in Time. Okay, so like there's actually like other books about like the other siblings, and in one of them, the two twins that are the main characters' little brothers, they get in their dad's little time machine whizzy warp thing, and they go back to like Noah's time, and they meet like Noah and like all this stuff, and there's angels that like visit the humans. It's a really good book actually. But yeah, so yeah, and but like they were really tall, and everybody thought they were giants because like all the humans were like a couple of feet shorter than them.
So I just presented all of this as just like something that felt cohesive to me. And the biggest point that I wanted to make, I guess, is that we have descended from these spiritual realms. And I almost hate to say descend, like it's also evolving, you know, where it's like gradually this spirit is densifying and dreaming itself into a physical reality. And now we're awakening from the dream. And now we're like able to move forward consciously. So I think that's kind of amazing that like we're here like in this cycle of evolution. I feel we're supposed to start embodying more of our higher consciousness, and you know what I mean, rather than being completely blind to the spiritual worlds, because before they only had clairvoyant vision, and we gradually lost it as we descended. And now that we're ascending, we're gaining it back. So it's like these worlds are starting to marry, you know?
Nice.
Kate, did you have anything?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, okay, what was that slide that you had where it was like the steps and then it was the galactic, like the
Yeah, I'll share
yeah,
it.
I wanted to see that
The
again.
levels of consciousness. I know I
Yes.
went through that one fast.
Because of course the galactic one like got my attention, but then I can't remember what was after that.
Okay, so let me make it bigger.
Because I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, so there's the cellular cycle, the mammalian, the familial, the tribal, cultural, national, planetary, galactic, and universal co-creation. So
Okay. And that was 2011.
yes.
Cool. So the galactic, what would that be? Is that something to do with the planets or anything? Or when the galactic center, is it anything like that?
I'm not sure specifically with that. I'd have to research it more, but my best guess would just be that we're becoming more aware of galactic energies. And this is such an interesting question too, because something I've been mulling over a lot is like, what do these galactic beings represent? Because I like to look at everything holistically. Like, so I guess to me, like, in one way, I think that the stars and the different planets could represent our initiations through other wheels of time. So, say, like, you lived on Pleiades, you went through like certain initiations there, and you could probably access your being on Pleiades from that time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, because it all really exists at the same time.
Yeah.
And so it's funny, the word galactic is so interesting to me now, because I guess all I'm getting at is that I feel like people feel like the galactic energies are outside of them or separate from them, but it's actually a part of us.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I know.
But I think the galactic is just opening your mind to those, to expanding your mind out to those areas. And I think it's kind of remembering where we've been, you know?
Yeah.
And I think it gets hairy sometimes too. Because also think about, you know how people talk about the reptilians and all these different forms of beings. Think about how that kind of relates to what Steiner was seeing, where we went through that point of evolution where our bodies were changing forms. And at one point we were like in a serpent or a dragon form. So in some ways, I feel like if you're seeing reptilians, perhaps that's just humanity in that stage of evolution.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But then also there's the other side of everything too, where not everybody makes it through their initiations. So then sometimes you're left with divergent beings. And those could be the ones that people are always like complaining about, you know, not having our best interests at hand. So there's like all of that out in that world.
Yeah.
But we're definitely becoming aware of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it feels like even just that energy is just more like it's like us becoming aware, but then that energy is just so potent, like as each year goes by, I feel. And so, okay, so then the universal co-creation, like what's that part about?
I think that's about what I'm talking about with the age of Aquarius. It's interesting that they mark it at 2011, which remember, like 2012 was the big year. A lot of people woke up or something.
Everybody thought the world was going to end in 2012.
Yeah, because the Mayan calendar ends, but it doesn't actually end. It just ends the fifth sun. But we've been conditioned to think that every age ends in a cataclysm.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily. Or we may have consciously, we may have evolved to a way where that doesn't need to happen, or we consciously changed it. I'm not sure. But I think that when we came into physical matter, that's when it became more like breathing and less of like a big cataclysm and then you come into the golden age, because it's like, yeah, okay, you can manifest anything like that if you're just living in a spiritual world and there's no physical material reality. But now that we're in a material reality, things have to happen more gradually or we would just like explode, you know?
Yeah.
But I'm thinking that universal co-creation it's co-creating with the source consciousness, being an individual and also being able to tap into source consciousness and to operate from it's like, it's really interesting because this is sort of why I went through the natural law part too, because it feels like now that we're in a physical body, we need natural laws. And so I feel like the co-creation is when you are adhering to natural law and creating from source, creating that way. Because there's a lot of things you can create as well that may not be beneficial, you know? So I don't know. That's what it means to me. Are you getting anything else on that?
Yeah, like, and I just feel like it's like the balance too. Like I was hearing when you were saying about like the individual and then the collective or the or source or consciousness. It's like always goes back to that balance thing, which I feel like I always have in my head. Like, how do we keep the balance?
Well, that's what age we're in now. The Bronze Age, 50% matter and 50% spirit.
Yes.
So it is all about balance, and we're learning because it's new.
Yes.
You know?
And it would be interesting. Like, I wonder what would be after this, like after universal co-creation.
I know. That's what I am not.
Like,
so let's look at, hold on, let me.
Yeah, I just find that really interesting.
So we'll be going into silver eventually. Yeah. And let me see if I can get one I can read a little better. So this age should be about, this one we're coming into.
Yeah.
Should be about 2,000 years long, roughly.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of time. But with the age of Aquarius, what we're looking at is technological advancement, and also like possibly galactic contact. But there's two things we really have to watch out for. One being the transhumanist movement, like people trying to put microchips in your brain, which is like getting away from natural law. And then also there's sort of a danger of this, if you stay in that materialistic idea of like aliens being something completely different from us, not being connected to them in some way, there's also sort of a danger of there becoming like this alien god myth, you know, where like you start worshiping the aliens and who knows if they're the divergent ones or not.
Yeah.
But the good side of it I see is starting to remember how to use the Earth's elements to advance our technology rather than keeping on making synthetic technology. I see us remembering things like, I don't know, maybe how we built the pyramids as we develop more, you know, further down the line. I could see us harnessing that energy again. And it's just going to be an age of frequency. Like the little Aquarius symbol is the waves. So there's going to be like new understanding of sound healing, frequency healing, moving objects with frequency, like all of that. And I think that's kind of what we're looking at in the immediate future. And so if you think about it, that in a way is like universal co-creation, because it feels like the more we get back in touch with source, the closer or the more we can learn about nature. It's kind of like both ways. It's sort of like, because that source energy is in everything, you know? So it's like, we're coming to this point where we just are understanding our physical world more, because now we're starting to understand the unseen parts of it as well, and actually like intuitively know those parts, you know?
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I see it going, but I couldn't tell you further from that.
Yeah. I know. I was just looking at like even just in to the Treta phase,
Uh-huh.
like Capricorn.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Capricorn, like that's so like structure and hierarchy. And I don't know. I just find this so interesting, like all the different ages.
Yeah.
Like I love seeing like where we came from and how it ties to the signs. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm just really fascinated about like the other ones to come too, you know? And I think
Yeah.
like with the whole, like when you were talking about like becoming more aware that like nature is source, like, and I think we're all becoming like humanity's becoming more aware that like we're all one,
Yes.
like we're all connected,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
not even just like us as people, but like to the trees and the birds and the water and everything.
Yeah.
And
I
the
feel,
stars.
sorry.
Yeah, sorry, and the stars too. Yeah.
Totally. And you know what connects all of that is the fifth element, ether. It's like that's like where the wave is. We've been focused on the particle for so long, and now the wave is coming back, and now we're starting to discover energy and like how we are all connected by it, you know, and how information works through it. I mean, I would love, like, I think possibly eventually we now have like cell phones and that kind of technology, but I think eventually we'll regain our telepathy skills and
Me
things
too.
like that, you know?
I totally agree.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree.
But
Because it's, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
No, because I was just gonna say, like, don't you guys find that even just happens now to you? Like,
Mhm.
you think of someone or something and then they're right there, like,
Oh yeah.
right?
All the time.
So it's
Like,
like, it's starting for like
not,
people
not
who
even
are,
like just like people in particular, but like I'll like imagine something and it just happens, or
yeah,
like yeah, I don't know. It's crazy how like not necessarily like manifestation and stuff like that's become easier, but it like just suddenly I'm like, wow, yeah, I have the power, and then yeah, it's crazy.
yeah.
Totally.
Which do you ever find, okay, when that happens, sometimes I'm like, did I manifest that or did I like see into the future that it was going to happen? And
No, I never thought of that, but now that's crazy.
do you
Like,
ever think about it that way? Like,
no,
and
I mean, now I'm gonna think about it like that every time.
yeah, like which one is it? Or is it both? Or I don't know. Like,
Is
I always do
manifestation
that.
seeing the future? Like,
I think it's both, because I think that all timelines exist. Like, I think we live in a multiverse where like all possibilities exist, and what makes our future is the choices that we make. So you could have seen that possibility because it already existed, but then also you chose it.
yes. Yeah.
so like
Yeah.
last week, I had to win a coin toss to leave work early because we were slow. And I remember I was like, man, I really want to go home. I'm gonna win this coin toss, like something stupid. But then in my mind, I was like, it's gonna be heads, and I'm going to go home early, and I'm gonna pick heads, and I'm gonna leave. And then it was like,
That's
Nice.
awesome.
I was like, okay, one, I did have a 50-50 shot, but two, like everybody says tails never fails, but I was like, no, it's gonna be heads.
That's awesome. I love that.
It was crazy. And I was like, oh, bye guys. I was like, I can't let them know how I did it.
Yeah.
I love that. I feel like for me, I just see a lot of synchronicities now that are just crazy, and like the things that I'm searching for just like appear, you know, like books or information. For me, it's always information that I'm looking for. So
Yeah.
that kind of stuff just starts like, when I get in a flow, it starts plopping itself in front of me, and I'm like, oh, thanks, you know.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Who knows though? It's like it could be like our higher selves in a way could be like, well, it could be all of it, past, future, and present, you know. It's just your higher self. But I was gonna say it could be my future self giving me what I needed to get where I'm going.
Yeah.
Yeah, who knows?
But isn't it funny thinking about time? Have you guys, when I was talking about the cosmic clock and oscillating between different dimensions and time being different. Did that resonate with you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Like, especially like about the part, like when I'm more present, it does seem like there's just more like space. Like I have more space in the day or something like that. That part really resonated with me.
Well, it's like when you zone out, you're like, you zone out or you disassociate or detach. And then suddenly it's like hours later and you're like, where did the day go?
Yeah.
But I agree with you. Yeah. If I, like my intention lately every day has been like to take, enjoy the small moments and take notice of the little things. And yeah, I feel like my day is more like fleshed out and, I guess because there's more to remember because I'm taking notice of the little things. That could be a way to look at it. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense too. Yeah, I feel like when I get really, really present, that's when just like, for one, it's more possible for me to enjoy what I'm doing, no matter what it is. And then also, it just seems like there's more time all of a sudden. Because it's almost like you're tapping in, when you're tapping into the now moment, you're essentially tapping into timelessness, right? Like, you're not thinking about the past or the future. You're kind of just in this, like this 0 point, like in the middle of the wheel,
Yeah.
But yeah, I just like thought this was a cool presentation because I think that it helps you figure out where we are. For me, when I first started awakening, I was so confused about what was going on. And you hear the golden age over and over and over in the new age. And that's fine. But like, I knew the golden age was related to the yugas. And when I started researching it, I was like, we're not going to the golden age. Like, maybe you could just call it the golden age because it's better than where we've been. But like, I started discovering sort of these patterns and I was like, this makes sense to me, because I used to think we were just going to like float off into heaven one day, like out of nowhere, or that like ships were going to come and we were going to get like saved or something. I thought all of these things, right? And then I was like, but my rational mind's like, Wendy, that doesn't make sense. But this cosmology that I just presented, even though it goes really far out there, it makes sense to me. Like it actually feels like it could be natural, like a natural process. And something Steiner says that I love is that like spiritualists can see how scientists think, but scientists can't see how spiritualists think, because you have to open your mind to the possibility that we are souls, or that there is something beyond what we can see, to actually understand where we came from,
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
It feels a little strange to be talking, like, I feel like I've said some things where I'm saying it very definitively and it feels kind of strange, but it's just like, I don't know, this just resonates,
Yeah. It just like feels right to your soul or something. Like,
yeah,
it just makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I'm going to go research like all the ages and the signs, and like, this is my next rabbit hole.
nice.
Like, I love that. I think it's
love
so
that you're going further down it too, because I covered a lot. And I mean, it's such a large amount of time. And the other thing, like in my chart of creation, even between the planets separating and then us evolving our body parts or whatever, who knows how many thousands and thousands and thousands of years that took. Like I really summed it up in my little diagram, but just to kind of give you an idea of the themes of that evolution. But it probably took like millions of years. Like you see that Yuga chart where it's like the whole thing is like trillions of years.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of wild. And then also like just the time thing is funny to think about.
I know. Yeah. That's what I always find with time, especially lately. Like, as I wake up more, it's just like, what even is time? Like,
it's not real.
Yeah, like it's starting to like feel different, and well, kind of like you were saying earlier, just not linear like it always did my whole life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I liked that spiral. I liked the sorry, there's a fly in here. I liked that the diagram with like the what's it called? The timer, like you did it
The
in the
hourglass.
yeah,
Yeah.
the hourglass.
Yeah.
I liked that. I thought that was really cool. Like I liked how you had the spiral, and just like at the bottom, like now we're at the bottom and we're kind of in the little spiral, the age of
Yeah.
Aquarius. And that's what's like, I don't know, I'm really like, what's next? It's like I want to know what's next.
Yeah.
You know, but that's so me. What is it? What's it gonna be? What's next? But
Well,
yeah.
I was just gonna say, I think it's hard to know because now the power is really in our hands. Like, not that it wasn't before, but now it really is. Like, where everyone has different timelines in mind. So that's something that's interesting to me too, because where we're going next depends on what timeline is most powerful in a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
But also, we're each going to be experiencing our timelines differently because of our different perceptions. But like, it's really, it seems like it's up to the moment to moment of like what people are doing, how they're feeling. And so I think that that's why it's so important for us each to heal and do what we enjoy, because we're vibrating that out and like jumping timelines, like every like monkey that jumps on to the same train, it's like we're jumping a timeline, you know.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I guess I was going to say I don't know where that timeline's going, except that what I would like to envision is it's going to the highest outcome of the Aquarian Age. And then there's also there's the other divergent timeline, and there's a lot of theories about what will happen with that. Like Dolores Cannon says people on the, you know, like that the earth is splitting, and the new earth, it'll be like what we're all aiming for. In the old earth, like nobody will even know, it will just be the same. And then Rudolf Steiner has this theory that there's another sphere being created called the eighth sphere, which is like where people who don't want to change or, you know, ascend on this timeline will go there, or perhaps the earth becomes that and then there's a new earth create, you know, I'm not sure. But it's that part really trips me out too, thinking about different planets like that. I can't wrap my mind around, except that I could see it happening gradually by, say, as the planets separate and as we die, we incarnate on the newer planet. That's the only way I could see it possibly happening. Does that make sense? Like perhaps it's like sort of just being developed spiritually and splitting off and then densifying, and then we eventually incarnate on that. And then when we live on that planet, like New Earth or whatever it's going to be called, you could even think of Venus, like we probably lived on Venus at one point, and then we were like, oh, there's a new planet called Earth being made, and then like you go incarnate on Earth to learn these different lessons, and then you remember Venus. It's like it's just going to be another sphere in the galaxy or the solar system, possibly. I don't know. But I think what matters the most right now is like what I've been realizing just through this whole journey of like discovering my spiritual self and my soul, is just that I think I suffered for a while because I really wanted to like ascend or see what the next thing was or whatever. And I think what is really important to focus on is sowing the seeds here now for the next thing. because it's really up to us, you know? So I think that like whatever we can find that we enjoy to make like this life now fulfilling and like enjoy this, all the physical things we get to experience. I think that's what's really important because I think it's changing. And then I also just think that's like key to developing in this lifetime. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I mean, I love wondering about what's next as well. That helps you plant the seeds or develop the seeds, you know.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's a wild time. I'm glad you guys like, I'm glad you stuck with me through it. I was like, this is crazy.
No, it was
This
awesome.
lady's crazy.
It was awesome. I loved it.
That was a good time, but yeah.
Yeah, that was
I'm
really
gonna
good.
have to hop off though because I gotta get ready to go to work. Yay.
All right. See you
Well,
later.
I hope you ladies have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. Have a good night at work.
Of course. Bye-bye. I'll see you next time.
Bye.